welcome to a bonus episode of Fully Booked. I'm Megan.
And I'm Shireen.
And it's the end of the month of August, and so I figured we should just talk about all the adaptations that are coming out.
There's a lot.
This month. Yeah, it's crazy. And also, like, don't think that I didn't see Netflix, that trailer for Uglies that dropped.
That was, like, subtle. Like
That came out of nowhere. I know. I felt like I didn't even realize that it was.
I'm like, I better go read that book.
Yeah.
Like,
But what is that? Scott Westerfeld, right? That's like an
old
an
one.
aughts, like an early aughts series that I remember being like a big deal. I never got around to reading it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we saw that the young adult dystopian. Don't think we're not coming for you. We're probably
we're definitely gonna be all over that.
We're gonna talk about that too.
Our jam.
Exactly, but it's the end of the month of August, which kind of gave us an opportunity to sit down and watch A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, which just premiered, I think it was August 1st on the American or whatever, North American Netflix anyway, because I think it had premiered on like BBC iPlayer or something in July.
Well, because it was made like in partnership, Netflix and BBC.
And the BBC. Yeah, okay, so that makes sense. Yeah, that's it. So it just premiered August 1st, so that gave us an opportunity. I don't have a VPN, so it gave me an opportunity to watch it when it actually came out.
Yep, and as soon as I saw that it was coming out, I was like, I should probably read this book. And then I looked over at my magical bookshelf.
And you were like...
If any of you have actually, been listening in, you know that I have some sort of weird, like, magical bookshelf. And I look over and I'm like, oh, shit, I own that book.
Yeah, you've got a black hole, a book, Mr. Bumpy situation going on. If that's a 90s throwback for anybody who knows, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, it's weird. Things just, the number of times that even, like, you'll recommend a book to me. Yeah. And then, a couple of months later when I'm kind of like, I should get around to reading that. You're like, I'm going to lend it to you. And then you're like, I can't find it.
I don't know where it is.
It's weird.
I bought, like, 2 stacks of books this month. I cannot find them.
That's very concerning to me. I don't know if it's like a reorganization, like gremlin that exists in your house, or if it's literally just your mom putting stuff somewhere that you can't find it.
It could be that, but then it's like this other like weird opposite situation where I'll be like, oh, I need to like read that book. I should buy it. And I turn around and look at the bookshelf and it's like the bookshelf giveth.
I wonder if that's what you need to do, is that you just need to buy stuff, ignore it, pretend it doesn't exist unless you're going to start reading one right away.
Exactly.
And then just in like 6 months be like, I should read that, and then just assume that it will be.
Expectantly look at the bookshelf, like
make yourself some sort of like Excel spreadsheet with like an inventory of what you buy.
Oh my god, no. I'm not that organized.
Oh man, yeah. Anyway, so we figured we would check out the series. Shireen's read the first book of the series, right? Because I think there are 3, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so. But the show is based on the first book.
Yes, exactly. Okay, yeah. So A Good Girl's Guide to Murder was initially published in 2019, the first book. It was followed by 2 sequels, which were Good Girl, Bad Blood in 2020 and As Good as Dead in 2021. And there's also a prequel called Killjoy, which was published in 2022, if I'm not mistaken. So my understanding, I think anyway, if I'm just like trying to look at information at the same time, good job me. Prequel novella, which is set like a while before the first book takes place. It's like set in like at like a themed party or whatever, and Pip has to like investigate something on her own or something. But this is, so I guess, like prior to her
early investigation.
Yeah, I think this is prior to her being jaded by the actual murder that she was trying to solve. Yeah. So it would just premiered. Currently, what I'm looking at is a score of 6.8 out of 10 on IMDb and 83% on Rotten Tomatoes.
That's high.
Kind of. Yeah, kind of. Yeah. I mean, okay, it wasn't, the audience score I think is 70% right now. Look, I don't know. You probably have a better idea about this than I do, just in terms of like your feelings about it, because you actually did read the book. Yeah. So you have a better jumping off point, I guess. Overall, like, I liked the storyline. Like, it was interesting. I liked most of the characters and everything, but there were definitely parts where I don't know that this needed to be a 6-part series. Like, it did drag.
Yeah, and what was weird, so I read the book, like, literally probably 3 days before the show came out. Sure. I was on vacation, and I read the book basically in its entirety on the flight. Like, it was a real page-turner. Yeah. It wasn't one of those that was tedious that you were like, ugh, I'm going to put this down for a bit and come back to it. Yeah. It was really well written, I have to say, and it was quick, and it was, the twists were good. And so I was really excited to watch the show, and then the show dropped, and I started watching it, and I was like, damn, this is slow. Yeah. Like, it just felt that the pacing was slow. They changed some of the characters. They changed some of the plot lines.
Oh, really?
Some of the twists weren't there. Like, overall, it was about the same. Like, we got to the same conclusion. But, like, some of the things in the book that were, like, really interesting, that were keeping you hooked.
Yeah.
They weren't doing it in the book that were keeping you hooked. They weren't doing it in the TV show.
Right.
And I was like, I'm confused because it's a 6-part series. Like, you had time to do it.
To expand into all of
into
those.
everything,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah, no, that's fair.
And I think that some of the components that they didn't address in the show would have contributed to that sequel that's coming up.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's been confirmed whether or not the series is getting...
I don't know.
Has been renewed or not.
Yeah.
I guess we'll have to wait and see. I guess it depends on viewership. Netflix never releases their information anyway. They just kind of renew or they don't, so who knows.
Yeah.
Okay, so basic breakdown. We're not going to go episode by episode. We'd be here forever. But basic breakdown of, like, the story and or mystery. It's a young adult or YA mystery series. Specifically, the entire series of books is as well, as far as I can tell. Obviously, I'm prefacing this with a big old spoiler alert. If you haven't watched it, I don't know why you're here, but also, like, if you're planning on watching it, I'm going to spoil who the person is who's responsible for all of this by the end as well. Like, and we're going to spoil who the killer is and stuff, so just be aware of that.
Yeah.
The story follows a character, a young girl by the name of Pippa, or Pip, Fitz-Amobi. So she lives in small town England. I don't remember where.
They don't actually say it.
Okay, whatever.
And the book takes place in the U.S., by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why'd they switch it?
I was surprised, but also what I will add is that when I was reading the book, I suspected that the author was British because she said, like, the way things were written were very British.
Oh.
But it took place, I believe, in the U.S. because the universities they're talking about are in the U.S. and, like...
That's weird.
Yeah, and I was just like, huh. Like, okay, so they flipped it to England. That makes sense. But I was like, I'm so confused because I think the author's British, but anyway, whatever.
Wow, okay. That's confusing for no reason, but sure. Anyway, so, and Pippa basically is entering her last year of high school, and she has to do a final written sort of project, essentially, which is also used as a bit of an admissions essay in order to get into university, and she's applied for Cambridge, so she's trying to get in there, and decides that there's a kind of, for her, unsolved mystery, but according to the mass public, solved mystery from 5 years previously, where a young woman named Andy Bell, who basically disappeared 5 years ago, and her boyfriend at the time, Sal Singh, or Salil, it's Salil.
Salil, yeah. But they call him Sal.
They call him Sal. They were dating at the time, and he was accused of killing her. Her body was never found.
Yeah.
So he was accused of having killed her. He eventually, again, allegedly confessed to the murder, and then basically 24 hours later killed himself.
Yep.
So there was, of course, easy peasy for the police force and everything, like, okay, tie it up all in a neat little bow, but Pip has always had lingering doubts about the case because for her, Sal never seemed like the type of person who would do something like that.
Yeah.
And so she decides to kind of set out, quote unquote, on her own, but also eventually with help from others as well in order to understand the case a little bit in more detail and really, like, track it down. She's got a very... I don't know if the book is like this, but she definitely has a distinctly sort of, I'm a slightly unsure of myself, Nancy Drew kind of vibe.
Yeah, she's definitely like this in the book. I do have to say that her character is pretty true to the book character. I think that the actress did a really good job. Yeah. And I think that Ravi as well, so Sal's brother Ravi.
Resident cutie patootie, by the way.
He is resident cutie patootie. The whole thing is that the Singh family has basically become pariahs.
Yes.
Since the murder and then Sal's death.
Yeah.
Everybody in the town, because it's a small town, has basically been cast out. Nobody talks to them. They stay away from them. In the book, a lot of it is like if you see them like having an exchange in a grocery store, they don't want to be touched by them, or like it's really extreme, like the reaction of the town. And so, Pip goes to see Ravi because she wants to ask him some questions. And Ravi is quite accurate to the book character as well. Okay. And she goes up, she knocks on the door, asks if she can ask him some questions. This is what happens in the book. Mm-hmm. And he says, yes, you can come back in a couple of days. And then when she does come back a couple of days later, he goes, oh, I thought that was a prank. Like, I thought you were joking.
Oh.
Because he's so used to people
being so
him.
Horrible about this whole situation. Yeah, they've essentially, because at least in the show anyway, like, he's dropped out of school and
he
stuff
did in the book too.
because he wasn't able to continue going because people were so horrible about
Yeah.
the whole thing, and they treat his family like complete garbage.
Yeah, and the whole thing was that, like, Andy Bell was seen as this, like, angelic, like, character in the community.
She's
and,
beautiful, white, and blonde.
Exactly. So, like, that is pretty, like, abundant in the book as well.
And obviously, Sal's family, the Singh family, are Indian, or of Indian descent.
Correct.
So, obviously, naturally, again, you know, a person of color dating a pretty white blonde girl.
Yeah.
The white blonde girl goes missing. Who do we think did it? You know, and don't get me wrong. You know, as somebody who consumes a ton of true crime content, yes, 90% of time the boyfriend or the husband did it. We know. It's unfortunate, but it is like a statistic that's been proven over and over and over again. However, if there's no other physical evidence that really indicated that, then again, police are just relying on a confession at that point. Yeah. So, and if they're saying that they've got it, again, that's something that, it's tricky.
Anyway, we'll get there. I'll do the distinctions of the book and the show as we go through.
No, well, that's fine. Yeah. Okay, so I'd say in terms of major characters, I'm not going to go through every single plot point there. Yeah. Obviously, Pip is your lead. She lives with her mom, stepdad, and her younger half-brother.
That's right.
And their dog, Barney. Yeah. Spoiler alert, there's some animal cruelty death in the show. So I just like kind of I know.
It was in the book as well, and I was like, maybe they won't do it in the show.
Yeah. No.
And then they showed it in the show, and I'm like, no. Yeah. And I'm sitting there hugging my dog who's trying to get away from me.
He's just like, oh God,
He's
Mom.
like, God, get off. And I'm like, I love you.
Yeah. So that's it. So her quick backstory is basically that Pip's birth father died when she was like about a year old. Yes. Or something. Yeah. He passed away. I don't remember how.
I think it was a car accident.
Okay, so very sudden death, and then that's it. A little while later, her mom remarried her stepfather, Victor. Fitz-Amobi, super sweet.
Lovely.
Her parents are great.
Oh my God, and he's so lovely in the book as well.
Yeah,
and
he's
just
wonderful.
Loves Pip.
Well, and she, you know, like she calls him dad. She doesn't call him Victor. No. She doesn't do anything like that. You can tell because he's been her father for most of her life. And
that's why, like, her last name is
Fitz-Amobi. Yeah, she's got the little hyphen in there because she took his last name as part of hers.
He's from Nigeria.
Yeah, exactly. So that's it. So she does have a younger brother who is like her half brother, but obviously that's it.
She adores him. Though.
Dad and named Josh. Her dad and stepmother had him. That's it. Like a number of years later, because Pippa's what, 16, 17? 17, and Josh is turning 10.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
Yeah. There's like a little difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like Shireen had said, basically everything kicks off because she decides she's going to look into this for her admissions essay, essentially, and do like a deep dive into this case.
Yeah.
And her first point of contact, she does speak to a couple of other people as well. So the other people that she talks to are people who are friends of Sal's, and one of them is her best friend, so Pip's best friend. Her name's Kara Ward. She lives with her older sister Naomi, who was good friends with Sal, and with their father Elliot Ward, who's a teacher at their school.
That's right. And Elliot, it's important to note that Elliot has always been like a father figure to Pip.
Yes, he's always been like a second dad for her. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, they're very close. She's incredibly inclined and knowledgeable with regards to like English lit and stuff, and that's what she's aiming for at Cambridge as well. And
in the book, it's journalism.
Oh, it's journalism. Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
Because in the show it was a little confusing because initially her idea for her essay was like the feminist impact on Gothic literature.
I know. I was like, that's a great project. You go do that.
Yeah. But no. Anyway, it's fine. And he's kind of like been like a mentor to her a little bit as well because they have a lot of that in common with their like love of literature and everything. So, you know, her first point of contact is like Naomi, who she tries to speak to about it, who it's very clear has been like very traumatized by what's happened in the past.
Naomi was good friends with Sal.
Yeah.
Right? So Sal was like a few years older than her. Mm-hmm. They definitely demonstrate like quite an age difference between the two of them in the show.
Yeah.
I actually liked what they did in the show by showing Pip as like young Pip.
Yeah.
And then that whole like scene
that
they kept coming back to.
That was great. And it was always done slightly differently.
Yes.
So, because in her memory, she couldn't remember. So part of the reason that she's been so obsessed with this is because 5 years prior, the day before Andy disappeared, Pip was at school getting some stuff out of her locker. Andy came rushing by her at the school. She had obviously been crying. She looked upset. She looked distraught. And she basically, you know, put her finger to her lips in the sense of like being like, please don't come and look for me. Don't tell anyone where I am, kind of thing, like don't tell anybody. And she went off into one of the classrooms nearby. Sal followed shortly after and said hi to Pip, and he said, have you seen Andy? And she, you could tell, hesitated because she didn't want to.
Because she was only 12 at the time.
Yeah, right? And she didn't necessarily want to say anything, and he was just kind of like, and his answer was basically, it's okay, I just need to talk to her about something. And so she did wind up telling him, well, she's in there, and he said, thanks. And that was it.
And Pip trusted Sal because Sal was best friends with Naomi.
Yes.
Who Pip had known her whole life.
Her whole life, because she'd been friends with Kara since she was, 4 years old or something?
Kindergarten, I think.
Yeah, that's it. So they've been friends forever. And so she has lingering guilt about that.
Yeah.
Because, again, she tries to actively remember the encounter over and over and over again as she discovers more things about, like, more details about what happened.
Yeah.
And it's always a question of, did I remember it wrong? Was he actually angry? Was he upset?
Is it my fault?
Is it my fault that he found Andy? Yeah. And if I had not said anything, would he not have found her?
Exactly.
And would she still be here today?
So that was definitely an extra plot point that they added into the show, but I actually liked it from a visual perspective.
It looked great, yeah.
Like, it was great to, like, really demonstrate the age difference between them, because, like, you say 5 years, it doesn't sound like much, but between 12 and 17 it's a big age difference,
it's a
right?
big age gap.
Oh, big time. So, I really appreciated that. And so, so as Megan's saying, that's kind of why she's been so obsessed by this. And at this point, like, her investigation ensues, and they allude to it in the show, same as in the book, that her teachers are not too pleased about her taking this on as a project, because it's not a typical project, right?
And of course that adds to the mystery as well, in the sense of like, oh, well, do people in the town know more than they're saying? Is that why they're upset about this? Because yes, law enforcement is upset about it, but it's not just them. They've also got teachers are like not super thrilled that this is the direction that she's decided to take. Also because this was a big stain on a small town, and most of them, I'm sure, want to forget it.
They want to put it behind them, right? And so as the story progresses, we start meeting more characters, and we start seeing kind of all the layers of this unfold, you know? And what's really interesting is, and in the book she says it, is that, like, Andy is seen as this, like, angelic character to their society.
Perfect angel, essentially.
And she is. Like, they show it in the show where they've got, like, a shrine set up to her.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Right? But as, like, the story progresses, you realize, like, Andy was selling drugs.
Yeah.
Andy was, like, she was not a nice person.
She was having relationships with all kinds of different men, one of whom, that's it, we come to learn, was some secret older guy that she was apparently having some sort of sexual relationship with. We don't know, like, romantic sexual relationship with. And that becomes part of the mystery, too. Who's secret older guy? What does he have to do with this, you know? And how, like, you know, like, obviously we wind up finding out, but that also, like, you know, comes forth and affects the whole storyline. But basically, essentially, Pip and Ravi, once he gets over his initial sort of suspicion of her and her intentions, they kind of team up, basically, so that they can, you know, go and, like, look into this together, because he, too, of course, has been stuck there this whole time. It's been 5 years. He'd also very much like to clear his brother's name and help his parents feel better and move on about all of this.
Well, he says it in the book that he doesn't feel like he's allowed to move on with his life because his parents are so broken by this.
They can't move on with theirs, basically.
And so he just wants to move on, clear his brother's name.
Yeah.
And, like, he's, like, working in a shop or something.
Yes,
like,
he thinks he works at a pub in the show.
Yeah, like, he's, you know, his life is really fallen apart.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's it. He wasn't
able to...
Not
that there's anything wrong with working in a shop.
No, not at all, God. Not at all. It's just, like, you know, in the sense that, you know, I think initially he probably had...
He was going to go to law school.
Yeah, he had the idea of, that's it, going off to college, like, finishing high school, going off to college, doing all of that stuff, and now he's just been stunted, essentially, and not able to do that, which is really upsetting.
Yeah.
So they team up... initially in just, like, you know, in true sort of YA fashion. Obviously it starts off as just, like, you know, working together on stuff, but then it develops into a friendship, which develops into, like, more romantic interest. Obviously they're really fucking cute. God, they're cute.
So cute.
Oh, they're cute. I mean, okay, I don't think we mentioned, but Pip is played by Emma Myers, who most people will know from Wednesday. She plays Enid, the werewolf who rooms with Wednesday, who's, like, super cute. And they're just, like, their chemistry is really good, and they're just, like, really sweet together. It's like a very, very much like a 17-year-old relationship.
It's very cute. He's 20, I think.
Okay, yeah, because he's like a few years older than her. Yeah. I guess one thing that I kind of appreciated is what you kind of see, and I guess this has something to do with the title of the novel, like A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, is that Pip at her core is a good girl.
Yeah.
She follows the rules.
Yeah.
She works hard in school. She's organized and stuff. In literally the initial opening scene of the first episode is her friends going into like the corner store.
That's right.
They're trying to buy alcohol because there's just like a younger guy at the counter and no one has ID.
Yeah.
And she has to go and be the one to distract the woman who like runs the place essentially. And she tries to for about 2 seconds, but she's the most terrible liar in the world. She has the worst poker face ever, and the woman deduces immediately what's going on. Like, are you here some sort of decoy? And she can't say no. She's like, yep. And then just runs away. Oh, it's so funny. And it's the same thing like with her parents. She can't lie to her mom at all about anything. And you can tell that as she delves deeper and deeper into this and her parents become concerned about the effect that it's having on her and, you know, the danger potentially associated with something like this and how it might not be a good idea to dredge up all of this, that this is her, literally you can tell this is her first rebellion she's ever had in her entire life, and like her mom doesn't know really what to do about it. Like when she tries to tell her not to go somewhere to look into something and she's like, no, I'm going, and she leaves anyway, you can tell that her mom's like, I literally don't know what to do about this.
And it's really funny. I thought that was a good side of this as well, because it goes and reinforces that good girl piece in the title, because in the book her mom actually wants her to go out more. Like, she's always encouraging her. She's like, you do too much homework, you're working too much, like, get out, go to a party or something, like, go have fun, you know, like, and so there's none of these, like, interactions where her mom's like, no, you're not allowed to do that, like, she, you know, I think there's one point where her mom's a little bit like, I don't know if she should be focusing so much on this, and her dad, Victor, is like, you know, let her make her own mistakes, let her find her own way, you know, so they're very much like that in the book, and so, but, you know, when we were watching it, my husband kept being like, this should be called How to Investigate a Murder When You Have No Regard for Your Own Personal Safety.
It is true. No, it is true. And I mean, like, we've talked about this previously, you know, like, in a previous month when we were talking about, like, young adult thrillers and stuff like that, just, like, again, like, the level of sort of danger that the characters find themselves in, where you're like, oh, my God, you're like, this person's about to get murdered for, like, half the series. You're like, oh, Jesus Christ, she's going to get killed. Robbie's going to get killed.
She just keeps, like, going into things, and, like, with no regard, no backup, no
Although
nothing.
part of me does, you know, kind of feel to a degree like that's, like, a teenager thing. Like, all of us thought we were invincible when we were, like, 16, 17. Like, we never actively, I don't remember having many times where I actively thought about, like, oh, this could be dangerous. I shouldn't do this. Like, I don't remember that being a main, like, I had it, and I like to think that I was fairly reasonable when I was younger. Like, I didn't do very much. I'm not a very cool person, so I didn't do very much.
You're cool to me.
Yeah. That's why we have this podcast.
This is our Good Girls Guide to Murder.
This is our danger. Talking about the lack of danger that we experience as children. But I feel like, well, whatever, it's part of the reason I'm alive today and have no severe injuries of any sort. But you didn't actively spend your time thinking about, like, oh gosh, what if something bad happens? Like, it didn't, that wasn't a thing.
Prepare for that.
I better be ready for that. Like, no, you didn't do that. You would go places with your friends, and most of the time, luckily, nothing would happen.
Yep.
And that was it.
That was it.
That was how we lived our lives. And
very sheltered.
Very much. So through, that's it, both, like, obviously there's also an overarching sort of thing of, you can tell that whoever it was who was responsible for all of this is somebody who's actively trying to deter Pip from looking into it. So throughout the course of the series, originally she gets, like, a note in, is it her locker or her notebook or something? Fuck, I don't remember. And
no, it's in her, so, I think she gets it at first when they go camping.
It's in the tent. Yes, that's it. You're right. Thank you. It's in the tent. So they go camping. There's a note that says, stop digging, Pippa. And she's like, okay, which is so clearly from somebody who's aware of what's been going on. Yeah. And then later on, she starts getting texts from an unknown number being like, you bitch, you shouldn't be looking into this. Like the usual threats, essentially, like something bad will happen if you don't stop. Yeah. You know, and throughout the course of all of this, her and Ravi grow closer, but also she's, again, young. And I kind of appreciate how, to a degree, she's not extremely gullible, but she is, you can kind of manipulate her. There's a younger character who's a cop. I hate him, by the way. He sucks.
Dan De Silva
there, yeah.
Yeah, you hate him more in the book.
Yeah, he sucks. We love a Dan who lives in this house, but we don't love this Dan. This Dan is a pain in the ass. He's very cocky, very kind of gross.
He is
too.
gross.
He's like a creeper half the time. It's really icky.
Well, he also, like, you find out in the book that he basically sabotaged, like, the investigation as well.
On purpose. Yeah. Okay. I'm not surprised to hear that.
Yeah.
So he's also somebody who's trying to deter her from things, and basically what's discovered down the line, I guess. Again, spoilers. God, I don't know why you'd be listening to this, but I'm just saying it anyway.
If you haven't watched it or read it, don't listen.
Don't listen. Or if you don't care, I guess that's fine.
Yeah, like
yeah. And he basically through investigation, she winds up finding out that not only did fuck around with the investigation with regards to Sal and implemented him more into, like, Emma's disappearance.
Yeah.
He also... Sorry, did I say that? Andy,
like,
sorry.
Andy. I'm like, who's Emma?
I think I was thinking of Emma Myers plays Pip. Sorry.
I'm just like, and I'm like, wait, what?
Wait, who's that?
Who's Emma?
Who's that character?
Yeah.
He also helped cover up, so there's a character that we haven't mentioned yet named Max Hastings, who was also part of Sal and Naomi's friend group. He's,
he sucks.
He's rich and pissed. Like, that's, like, pretty much that's his character trait. That's what he is. He's a piece of shit.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, he's the rich kid who hangs around with all the other ones and stuff and is always the one who's, like, getting into trouble and doing things. There are these parties that take place regularly that are, like, secret underground parties called Calamity. Oh, they just make me want to punch someone in the face. They're so stupid. They're basically underground raves, and they happen in different areas close to the town.
Kid.
Yeah, that's it. Like, it's like there's, like, a secret code with these weird black ribbons that are hung outside, like, in the woods and stuff that are supposed to tell you, like, where the next calamity is taking place or something. It's like a code. And they're all, like, underground, and they're not known until almost, like, the day of kind of thing.
Right.
So Pip and her friends, so, like, Kara and their other friend Lauren, the girl with the red hair, yeah, they managed to figure out where the, like, next calamity is going to be, because they're like, okay, well, you know, Andy would go to these parties and stuff like that, so we should look into that. So they go, and she questions, like, a drug dealer who is the person who sort of, like, brings to light the fact that Andy would selling drugs for him, essentially.
He actually takes up a lot more space in the book.
Oh, really? Okay.
As a character, because the whole thing was that, so in the show, the first scene is Andy walking home, like, stumbling.
Yes, with a big head wound, essentially.
Yeah, but you don't actually find out that that's something that happens, like, until way later on in the book. And, like, what you do know is that basically Andy disappeared, but she was seen on, like, CCTV cameras at, like, 10:38 p.m. or something.
In her car, right?
In her car, driving it. And then her car was found on a street where the basically outside the drug dealer's house.
Right.
So, like, he becomes, like, prime suspect, kind of, for Pip, because she's got a list of suspects.
Yeah, she has a murder board in her room, because she's got, like, a chalkboard wall. It's great.
Yeah, but she actually has, like, a list of suspects.
Yeah.
And some of them don't even end up, like, being mentioned in the show. But the drug dealer is one of them.
Howie? What's his name? Howie,
yeah.
Thank you.
And she follows him around quite a bit in her car.
Their whole scene in the calamity party made me laugh so much, because he had such a moment of, like, you want to know how I got these scars? I was like, what is this?
Yeah, I know, like, he's a lot less lame in the book.
He's terrible in the show.
He's still pretty lame in the book. And, like, there's this whole premise where, like, his reaction towards questions about Andy lead Pip to think that, like, at first she was like, maybe there was, like, a sexual relationship going on between these two. She's like, maybe this is, like, mystery older guy.
Yeah.
But she realizes that, like, based on his facial expressions and his reactions to things, that, like, he wanted more from Andy, but she wasn't interested.
She wasn't interested, yeah. And she was just selling the drugs and stuff and whatever. So, yeah, and it also, again, it helps to kind of start to pull apart the public's sort of impression of Andy, which is that she was this perfect, wonderful girl who never did anything wrong, but there was, like, a lot of stuff. So she would go to these parties, and again, there's still a lot going on there to reinforce that, like, Sal wasn't involved in any of this. Like, they're like, no, like, you know, Naomi reinforces that he didn't like drugs. He never took anything, because it just wasn't his style at all.
And Ravi says the same thing.
And Ravi says the exact same thing. He's like, no, he never did that at all. And so she's able to, that's it, deduce that there was an entire sort of, that's it, subplot with like drugs that were being sold. So, okay, is it somebody she was selling drugs to maybe and
like,
stuff?
They do clearly state that, like, of the drugs she was selling, like, she was selling things like Rohypnol and stuff, which is, like,
a date rape drug, yeah.
Which is, like, in itself, you're like,
ooh.
Oh, really?
I
like,
know.
A teenage girl selling Rohypnol to teenage boys at parties?
I don't love that. I really
like,
don't love
like,
that.
Wow,
and that comes back later.
Shit. Yeah.
That comes back later, too. That's quite important later.
Well, I mean, it's, like, one of the core plot points.
Yes, and it feels like icky, but like a throwaway, I find, initially when it comes up, so that was smart.
The drugs, right?
Yes, well, because he's like, oh, this is like, this is just like, that's weed, this is like cocaine, this is this, this is that.
Ecstasy or something.
Yeah, that's because they find a list of Andy's sort of like contacts, but she has them all in code, like with people's initials and stuff, and like what they're into. So yeah. So they're able to, that's it, kind of like deduce this. There are like multiple suspects throughout the course of it. There's obviously the drug dealer. There's the cop as well, Dan De Silva. It turns out, no, he wasn't involved in the disappearance or anything. His involvement was to do with, I think, what was it, a year prior?
Yeah.
Okay. New Year's of 2019, and this happened in like April, so not even a year, like several months earlier. Dan was called by the piece of shit Max Hastings out to this like country road because Naomi and Max
and
Kara, thank you. Well,
no, not Kara.
No, not Kara. Wait, who was with them? There were two of them, three of them.
There was Naomi. There was Max.
Yeah.
Sal wasn't there.
Sal was not there.
But there was a third one.
There was a third person. Whatever. It's like a throwaway friend. I don't think that he matters in the.
He's more present
in the book. Yeah, I don't even think he has a line in the show, but he's like another person who's with their group of friends. Anyway, they'd gone to a calamity party. They were all super schwasty pants, and were swerving around like a small road outside, and ran another person off the road whose car flipped over and everything. So it was like a full hit and run. Yep. And apparently Max called Dan to the scene to help cover up their involvement. Like, oh, we were never here. He just, he went off the road by himself.
And they never really go into it in the show why the police officer would be willing to help cover this
Not
stuff.
really. There's like a blackmail element to it.
I think
because
so.
Because Dan's sister, Nat, had nudes that were leaked, and Max had them, and I think was saying that he would leak them to everybody if Dan didn't help him.
Yeah, so this is different. In the show, Nat is one of, what the hell is her name?
Andy. We're really bad at this. I know, right?
One of Andy's two main friends.
Yeah. Okay.
But in the book, she's actually not her friend at all. They're actually like rivals, kind of. Yeah. Because Nat is like attractive and blonde, and Andy feels threatened by her, kind of. And so Andy's the one who leaks the nudes in the book.
Okay.
And then it sends Nat like off the rails. Yeah. And so Dan had a sexual relationship with Andy.
Okay.
When he was the janitor at the school.
Oh, right. Yes. And they do that is in the show as well, because he's just like, he does admit to it. Yeah. And, Pip is pushing him where she's just there and she's like, yeah, okay. He's like, yeah, I was working as the janitor, and she's like, yeah, and how old was she?
Yeah.
And of course it's deduced that she was 15 at the time, so it was statutory rape.
Which, I don't know if that exists as a law in the UK.
Is that not a thing?
Well, the only reason why I say that is because...
But if she's below age...
I'm taking it down memory lane here, people. I studied English in the UK, and when I was at A-level, we were studying One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah.
And the main character is in an insane asylum for statutory rape.
Yes.
And I remember we were having a whole discussion in college about how, like, this man raped this girl. And I had to, lift up my hand and be like...
That's not what that was.
It's not quite the same. It's not good.
No.
But, it's statutory rape, so it just means that, he had sexual relations with a minor. And, I remember my teacher just being like, well, that really changes my whole discussion here.
Oh, man.
And so I don't know...
Is there not, an age of consent in the UK? Is
I think it's really young.
Gross.
You'd have to look it up, but I don't think it's quite...
16. Oh, they were saying 16 in the show.
I think that might be, 16.
Okay. That's really young.
16.
I hate that, by the way. I very much hate that it's 16. Why is it not 18?
What's the U.S.? The U.S. is 16 as well.
I know, it's weird.
What's Canada? It's Sorry, I'm going down a rabbit hole here. 16.
But I wonder if it's, I think that there's a difference between age of consent when two 16-year-olds versus like a 20-year-old and a 16-year-old.
Yes, like that's a whole different story,
yeah, I
right?
think that's,
like,
I think that plays into it quite a bit as well.
It definitely does, I know, in North America.
Yes, 100%.
Because that's what makes it a felony.
Yes.
Because, like, I don't know, does statutory rape charges exist between a 16-year-old and a 16-year-old?
No, I don't think so. And I think that that's what age of consent is meant for, in the sense that if two 16-year-olds or like a 15 and a 16, or like a 16 and 17-year-old or whatever, it's fine. But I'm thinking more of like a person who's over 18 with a person who is under the age of...
That's where it becomes a felony. So yeah. So all that to say, like, she has a whole... Because Andy would have been 15 when he was, like, not a minor.
No, like maybe late teens, early 20s.
Yeah, exactly. So so that's why Pip kind of freaks out over this whole interaction. But
and he gets her back, of course, because he's like, oh yeah, but you know, like, where I didn't do anything about this, it's fine, she didn't want me, it's okay, kind of thing. But like, oh yes, and now look and see, this is what I'm talking about with the gullibility a little bit of this character, is that he shows her a portion of Sal's interrogation video, and at one point he, you know, gets visibly very frustrated, like essentially loses his mind, throws a chair, and physically tries to leave and is like barricaded by officers. Yeah. That is, I find, looking at that from the perspective of a 35-year-old, I look at that and I'm like, well, how long had he been there? How had they been questioning him like this? They were shouting at him that entire time. A lot of people would lose their fucking minds eventually. But for a 17-year-old who's never seen anything
and
like
who's,
this,
like, not too sure about his innocence.
Exactly. I think it sways her a little bit. So there is a point of time in which, like, her and Ravi have a falling out, and they're like not speaking for a while, because he's, you know, basically she comes to him with this, in her mind, evidence, and he's just like, wow, like, I thought you would be the one person who would be sort of supportive of this the whole way through, but here I am.
Well, in the book, and I don't know if they don't actually go into detail about Sal's, like, death in the show, but the way he dies in the book is that he has, and I'm using air quotes here.
Yeah, air quotes. Be aware of that, because it's more to it than you think that there is.
He has put a plastic bag over his head, and he's taped it, and he's taken a whole bunch of, like, sleeping pills. Yeah, that's a way people die by suicide. Because that's the way that people
decide to end their lives on a regular basis.
And in addition to that, they find that he's got Andy's DNA under his fingernails.
Yes.
So he's got, like, her skin under his fingernails. And then the other thing is that they find her blood in her trunk. In her car that's been like,
that was found later.
Outside of the drug dealer's house. Yeah. So, like, there's a lot.
There are a lot of things that were done, you can tell, to point people in a certain direction, obviously.
Or he has her blood under his fingernails. It's something like that.
Okay.
Anyway, that's, like, a key thing, because you find out later what actually happened.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, by the end of this, like, after, like, you know, after Pip discovers that's it about the car accident the year earlier, like the hit and run the year earlier, and all of this kind of stuff, it's sort of a fluke to a degree how she winds up finding out literally who secret older guy is. It's a fluke. It's out of nowhere, because she gets a phone call, and she had saved that number that she had found earlier. Yeah. She saved it, she kept it, and then suddenly she's getting a phone call from that number, and she's like, what the fuck? So she answers the phone, and it's Naomi, and she's like, she's very confused, which are, like, everybody is. We're all confused. I'm confused, you're confused, we're all like, wait, what? And Naomi's saying, like, calling her to say, because we skipped right over the dog death, but we're not talking about it. There's a text of, like, there's a text, the dog disappears during Josh's 10th birthday party, and I don't know what this person did, but they basically made it look like he was hit by a car. Like, just because he must have run out into the road, essentially gotten hit by a car.
In the book, he drowned.
Oh, I hate that. Yeah. Oh, I hate that so much. Okay.
Yeah, but, like, it's like then they show the scene of the dog by the road, and he's dead, and I'm like, I'm sad.
Oh, I hated it.
And that was when I was hugging Ozzy.
Yeah.
He was trying to get away
and he
from
was
me.
not happy. He's like, oh, shut up, Mom. I'm right here. So so, like, you know, Naomi calls her to say, I'm really sorry about Barney, and she's like, whose phone is this? Like, she's like, what the fuck? And Naomi's just like, oh, like, my phone, because they've been in confrontation with Max, and he broke Naomi's phone. And so she's like, well, I didn't have a phone, so this is just an older one of my dad's, Elliot, who we know as, like, their dad and Pip's, like, sort of, that's its second father figure, mentor, essentially, this whole time. And she's just like mind blown by this. So yeah, it turns out that Elliot was someone that Andy was having a relationship with for a period of time. Man, this girl was having relationships with not the best people. I think Sal was like her first move into something more positive, because between Elliot and then the drug dealer and Dan the shitty cop, like Jesus Christ, like it's too much. It's not good. Not good. She had a string of very shitty guys in her life, and then she'd finally found the good one, which makes me really sad.
Well, I mean, one thing I will say that in the book, she's actually having all these relations while she's with Sal, and they're not like that in love. Like they're not like.
Oh, really? Yeah. Okay.
So they kind of changed that up a little bit in the show, which I get why they did that, and that makes sense.
Yeah.
But you know, you find out that so like Pip goes to interrogate Elliot and find out what happened, and essentially, you know, she's like, tell me about this like relationship, like what happened, and so. Basically, what had happened in the book was that Andy was pissy with Elliot because he tried to break it off with her, and she wasn't going to have that because, you know, she was who she was. And so she left a, I don't know, half-naked picture of herself in his classroom. And she said, I've hidden a picture of myself somewhere. Like, you're going to have to ask me where it is, and you're going to have to talk to me. Like, she was, like, manipulating him.
Okay.
Max Hastings found this picture.
Yeah, because he has it.
He has it. And then, just kind of sidebar, they go and investigate the inn where the picture was taken.
Yeah,
and in the book, it's like a very small inn, and the woman who runs it has dementia, but she runs it with her son. And she looks at the picture and she goes, oh, she was here last week.
Yeah. And they're like, well, that's not possible.
Like,
She's been missing for 5 years.
She's been missing for 5 years. And then they kind of never address this again in the book, and so I wonder if that contributes to the sequel, but anyway, that's maybe kind of like a sidebar, but anyway, so she actually calls the police before she goes to talk to Elliot, thank God.
Okay, wait, no, I'll talk about it after. It's fine, sorry.
Calls the police, goes to confront Elliot, he tells her, you know, in the book and the show, that, you know, they had a relationship. He didn't mean for this to happen. She had come over to his house. They had an altercation. He pushed her over. She smacked her head on the desk, and her head was bleeding.
And then she left.
And then, you know, he's like, nothing else happened. Like, I didn't kill her.
Yeah, you just said, I never saw her again after
I never saw her again.
Yeah.
But then Pip hears something from upstairs, and all throughout, and they actually do talk about this in the show a little bit. I don't know if you caught it, but all throughout the book and in the show, there are scenes where Pip is over at Kara's house.
Yeah.
And they mentioned, like, snacks and food and stuff that's going missing. They're like, they're like, oh, we just bought these cookies. Like, where did they go?
It does come up a lot.
In the book, it's always Butterfingers, like, where'd the Butterfingers go? And so she hears a noise, and she realizes there's someone else in the house.
Yeah.
Because this is a house that Elliot would have
owned previously.
Yeah, they thought he sold it. And in the show, they say that he's like tutoring, and he needs to make money as a tutor because his teacher salary doesn't.
And then the girls are also bringing up, but you're apparently bringing in all this extra money. Where the hell where's the food? Like, where are the extra snacks and stuff?
Right. And in the book, actually, they are like flush with cash. Actually,
oh,
so
wow.
like Kara's mom, who passed away, was from a very, very wealthy family, and they had a life insurance policy that paid out as well.
Okay.
So he doesn't actually have to work,
right?
Let alone go and tutor 3 times a week. And so Pip is the only one who kind of clues in on this.
Who's like, that's weird, right?
So she starts suspecting him actually before she gets the phone call.
Oh, okay, because in the show, it's very, like, out of nowhere. You're like, ooh.
And I get why they did that in the show, because it's, like, shock value.
Well, you would have guessed it, wouldn't you, like, earlier,
Yeah, and so in the book, like, you realize that, like, hang on a minute, there's something not right here. So she confronts him at this house, and she hears a noise, and so she runs upstairs, and she goes up, and there's a girl there.
Yeah.
And in the
I literally thought it was Andy for a minute. I was like...
Well, that was the idea, right?
Yeah.
Now, in the show, she's like, no, I'm not Andy Bell. Like, I told this man that I'm not her.
Yeah.
And he's been keeping me here.
Yeah.
In the book, what happens is one day he's driving and he sees this girl walking by the side of the road, and he fully believes it's Andy.
Yeah.
And she is like a drug addict, and she's like not all there. And she's also not like fully like I don't know what the word is. Like, she's got, like, a bit of, like, a mental, like,
Health
developmental
issue.
issue.
Disorder of some sort, okay.
As well. And so, he actually convinces her that her name is Andy Bell.
Oh, wow.
And so, in the book, when she goes upstairs, she looks at her and she goes, "Hi, I'm Andy Bell." And
Pip's like, "No, you're
looking
not."
at her and she's like, "You could be, but you're not." And so he's convinced himself in his guilt that it's actually Andy.
Oh, I like that better.
Yeah, that's why cool. I was like, "Oh, that's too bad." Yeah. Like that they didn't go down that route.
Yeah, no, the girl in the show is obviously she's struggling, but she's like much more cognizant of what's been happening. Like she's been there for a period of time, and she's much more like, no, like, you know, he like basically convinced himself, and he locked me up here, and that was it. I tried to leave, and blah blah blah, and that was like that's really what it is. That's the only storyline. So.
Yeah, no, it's a little bit more involved in the book, and like what's interesting is like he even says to Pip, he's like, "No, that's Andy," and like she's doing so much better. Like she's a much nicer person, and like she likes to watch movies, and you know, I come and I sit up here with her, and like our relationship isn't the same anymore. And like Pip is like slowly backing away, like oh, like this is really twisted, you know, and
so,
it is.
Yeah, so
police show up.
Yeah, police show up. He's arrested, and he confesses. Here's the interesting part of it, right? Obviously, partially because he also like quote unquote believed that Andy was still with him. But even so, after all of that's made clear that like Andy is not with him, this other girl is someone completely different. He confesses to killing Sal. Yeah. And it turns out that he is the one who drugged him and smothered him. And so if, from what you're saying, essentially did the whole, like, wrapping a bag around his head with, like, duct tape. Because, again, that's not generally the way that a person chooses to end their life.
No, and because he had pushed Andy over in his own office and her head was bleeding, he took some of that blood and put it under Sal's fingernails.
Yeah, so it looked like he was involved in some way. And
then sent the confession from his phone.
Yes, yeah, that's it. Where he, again, that was Ravi's thing, was always that Sal texted like a 5-year-old child and couldn't spell anything properly or like use grammar at all when he was texting. But that last text he'd written perfectly with perfect punctuation, grammar, spelling. And so he was like, no, that wasn't him. I don't believe that was him. And so that was like a part of what they had spoken about as well. Yeah. So he's arrested. And again, that's it. Everyone's just kind of like, I don't know why he won't just cop to killing Andy. He obviously fucking did it and whatever. And I remember I was sitting there and I was like, nah, I don't think so. I'm pretty sure there's an extra layer here because there's a whole episode left. So
yeah, I was like, there's like quite a bit of the book left here.
Yeah, you're like, hey, I feel like the denouement would have been over already. Yeah. And it turns out, lo and behold, that is the case. He actually did not kill Andy. So Pip also believes that this is the case because she's like, no, I don't think that he actually did at all. I think he did everything after to cover things up.
Well, I think it was pretty obvious that his story was clear. Like, he thought he killed her.
Yeah, but she had also left.
She left.
So he was like, I didn't see her again.
Which is why, like, he killed Sal, because he assumed that she was dead, but that they just hadn't found her.
Yeah. So what we get into with the sort of end of everything, like the final climax and conclusion, is that it turns out at a previous calamity party prior to all of this occurring, when Andy was selling her Rohypnol, some of the Rohypnol that she sold was to Max Hastings, the piece of shit trust fund baby, who in turn drugged her sister, who I know we haven't spoken about previously, but it would have been hard to introduce her earlier. So, God, what's her character's name? Becca, thank you. So he drugged Becca and then proceeded to rape her at one of these calamity parties, and she woke up the next day and had like no idea where she was or what the hell was going on. Essentially, she was super fucked up at that party, and it took her a while, I think, to figure out what had happened, but eventually she did figure out that it was Max who had done it, but it was Andy who had sold him the drugs that he used to do that in the first place. And the night that Andy and Elliot had their confrontation, she wandered home in a daze after with, again, a big head wound, got home, and Becca was there, and they spoke. She said, I'm leaving, basically, like, I'm leaving to go, like...
Andy said this.
Yes, yeah. Andy said this, sorry, yes, she said, I'm leaving, like, I have some money, I'm leaving, I'm getting out of here, I'm not staying, I can't deal with all of the stuff here anymore, and Becca confronted her at that time about the fact that she's the one who sold Max the drugs that he used in order to assault her.
Yeah.
And then it turns out that, unfortunately, that Andy was killed by her own sister in the end.
Yeah, the, kind of the additional layer that you have in the book is, so for a while, Pip thinks that their dad is a suspect.
Yes, Jason. She does do it in the show, too.
She does. A little bit, yeah, because, and you find out that, like, Jason, the climate that he created at their home was that he was always pitting the girls against each other, so he was always, like, basically telling Andy and Becca that they had to be pretty because that's all they could be in the world, and, like, always kind of comparing them to each other, and, in that scene where Becca confronts Andy, she, wants her to, like, acknowledge what she did, basically, and, like, to be like, this is what happens when you sell teenage boys Rohypnol, basically, date rape drug, and in the book, Andy, like, turns around and really nastily is like, well, you should be glad somebody wanted you anyway, because you're just an uglier version of me.
Right.
And so Becca gets really mad, not realizing that Andy has a head injury.
Already has a head injury, yeah.
And she pushes her and she hits the wall, and they show it in the show. Andy falls over, she collapses, like, is unconscious, but then she starts throwing up, and she chokes on her own vomit, and that's how she dies.
And that's how she dies, yeah. So then Becca buried her, or she brought her to, like, this underground cave. Figure that shit out for me. What the hell, England? Like, what?
In the book, she takes her to, like, a water treatment plant, and she dumps her in a water tank.
Well, essentially, like a water tank. That's it. So that's what she did. She takes Pippa there once Pippa sort of like put two and two together as to what it is that occurred, but she's drugged her as well, and luckily Ravi and Kara show up sort of last minute to save her, essentially. There's no indication as to whether or not Becca's arrested. Is she arrested in the book?
She absolutely is arrested in the book.
So I feel like we did not see that in the show at all.
Because, like, Becca was going to try and kill Andy.
Yes.
In the book, and she actually, like, so sorry, not Andy.
Pippa.
Pippa.
Yeah, it's fine.
There's too many names.
I know.
Pippa runs out into the, like, because there's, like, a forest there, basically, where Andy died. She runs out, and Becca's following her, and she gets to her, and she starts to strangle her. And then she lays off at the last minute because she's like, I can't do it. I feel bad. Okay. And then they find her. But yes, she does absolutely get arrested.
Okay, so that's weird. I don't know. Anyway, and then we finally get, like, our wrap up sort of thing, in the sense that, like, everybody's gone who's supposed to be gone. She'll be able to go off to college. Robbie will hopefully be able to do the same. They do have, like, a little, like, confession of feelings for one. Well, not a confession, they kiss.
So cute.
Right at the end there, but they're adorable, so it's fine. And everybody kind of, like, slowly starts to pick themselves back up. So it is kind of, it could be open-ended because you could continue it, but also if it ended like this, that would also kind of be the end of the show, and that would be it, right? Like, it's like a mini-series and it's done.
Yeah, like, they did a good job with it there, and, like, even with the book, like, it was, like, clearly, like, case closed, like, standalone.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. So yeah, I just, that's it. Like, it's like, fun. It's interesting. It's like an intriguing story. The performances are good, but there's just a lot of lagging.
There is.
Like a lot of extra scenes. And I know a lot of them did mean something, but it starts to be a lot after a while,
Yeah, and I wonder if, like, it's more interesting in the book because there's more details put in, or, you know, could they have put the same details in the show and it wouldn't have felt so laggy? Like, I'm not sure.
Maybe.
Because they had time.
Yeah. No, they definitely did. So maybe it would have been trimming certain things and adding a couple of other twists or something instead of would have, I don't know, kept, I guess, interest for longer.
Yeah, like, I certainly thought that I was going to be, like, binge watching the show and getting through it, but it took me, like, a week and a half to watch it.
Well, there you go.
Meh.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, a little bit middle of the road, but I would love to know if anybody who, especially people who have also read the book or maybe read all of the books, possibly have, like, some opinions about it. Like, how do you feel about it? Do you feel like it was, like, an accurate or good adaptation? Did you find it boring? Did you find it better in some cases? Whatever it might be, like casting choices, all that kind of stuff. You guys can definitely let us know about that over on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at FullyBookedCA, and you can feel free to check out our Facebook group, which is at facebook.com/groups/book was way better. But until next week, guys, keep on reading.
Thanks, everyone.